up in you. Baby, all I want is you. 2 a.m. halfway through another night.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
Have you ever met a single person in your life that enjoys paying taxes? No, no one does. If you can't sleep at night because you have a huge problem with the IRS, I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Good afternoon, Johnson County. We are blessed to be back with you again on this beautiful, is it Tuesday? I thought it was Thursday already. So welcome back on this beautiful Tuesday to Let Freedom Ring. I'm your host, Jake Wernette. I know we left everybody on a bit of a cliffhanger last week about what this glorious day that our Lord has made would hold for the show. And to be frank, I didn't really have any topic to do today, but I was thinking about it on the way here. In the frantic run from Arlington to here. Everybody knows how the traffic is this time of day. All of a sudden, it hit me like a truckload of bricks that we are experiencing right now. Something that is being taught in our schools, something that is fornicating the minds of our youth in so-called educational establishments and institutions in this country that used to be respectable, but we're not going to get into the education system today. I'm talking about Neo-Malthusianism.
Can I have a drink while I'm on air?
Take some of that water, man. But
Need something a little stronger.
I think we're going to need something stronger when we get through with this. It's a very interesting topic. So Thomas Malthus wrote a 160-page essay, what they considered an essay, back in 1798.
All right, a 4-page essay and call it a day.
Thomas Malthus was an Englishman, English philosopher back in his time, who in the 18th century had predicted a population dilemma. For those who are curious about what that equates over to in the 21st century, essentially what we're talking about is the population problem. Overpopulation, the earth doesn't have enough resources. The earth doesn't have enough sustainment material for 10 billion people. Now, we might get into, some of the modern, you would say, some people would say philosophers, I would call them technological billionaires and the big elite. But the Thomas Malthus essentially in his book said that to simplify it for everybody, when the population goes unchecked in the ratio to food and land and all of these other resources that we need to survive, it's going to come to a time when there needs to be less people in the world. Now, you take that how you will. There's a few people running around on TED Talks and stuff today. One of them formed his own manufacturing company for computers, has his own software company. He wears glasses, runs around in turtlenecks and sweaters. You put two and two together. There was a time when he did a TED Talk and said, we're running up to about 9 billion people in the world. If we do a great job with new vaccines, reproductive health care, we can perhaps lower that by 10 to 15%. Those were his words. These are Thomas Malthus's. He starts off this essay in chapter 2, getting into the issue, said, I said that population, when unchecked, increased in a geometric ratio and subsistence for man in an arithmetical ratio. Basically, this whole essay is 160 pages about why man should be regulated, much like the rabbits that breed on the ground and the beasts of the earth. Man, too, is an animal that needs to be checked in its population. So you take that how you will. We're essentially introducing the topic today. Neo-Malthusianism in Latin. Neo means new. So we're talking about new or modernist Malthusianism. The rebirth of the idea that the United States and the world at large would not suffer from a population decline. Now, I personally, my view is that if we have rich elites running around telling us that we need to check our population, that we can't have X amount of kids, we look at and can't help but wonder about the correlation with communist China and many of these other countries that have notably in their past or current are now suffering a population pyramid collapse, essentially having too many older people at the top. The pyramid is now in an inverted V rather than the more young people at the bottom sustaining the older generations at the top, which was at the time when FDR was president, how they had envisioned that our population would always be in this country. They didn't intend on people living 90, 100 years, and now not being able to pay for the welfare state and the social security system. So we're going to get into, more than likely in the second 30 minutes of this show, getting into why Thomas Malthus is wrong. In the meantime, take a listen to what's the Marxist Party has to say about it from Marxist.org. Take a listen to some of this article this time is different, or is it? Neo-Malthusians and environmental optimists in the age of climate change, which is the new thing that they're pushing. And I printed off some graphs here, for some from the USDA, some from just random websites that I had used in my college years for sociology class. We're going to be looking over some of those graphs here shortly. So we're going to start off with a World Economic Forum article, and I know that everybody loves when we bring these in, but the first one here, and I'm going to show it to the camera, that way you're not sitting here thinking that we...
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, I knocked over the phone on that one, man. That's no bueno. Anyway, so I'm going to show you real quick. This is it. It's a authorized release from the World Economic Forum. The pandemic is just another sign of our broken food system. It goes in here to say a recent report proposes a 50% increase in global food production will be required to feed the world's population in 2050. Forests and savanna will be stripped and repurposed into arable land. Ecosystems will be lost, and intensive monoculture farming techniques will degrade land in a bid to produce more food. Producing more food will not tackle the vast amount of food that is wasted before and after it reaches our plates. So I'm going to this back a little bit so I can get into this with you guys too. It goes in to say as many as 265 million people around the world are suffering from food insecurity. The World Food Program has warned of widespread famines. And it's ironic that we have seen this verbatim that comes next after this from the World Economic Forum numerous times. I know that in the last Thursday episode, we mentioned the World Economic Forum had used the word created image of whatever, a godly image with lowercase g. The World Food Program has warned of widespread famines, and get this, Mick, of biblical proportions.
These people don't believe in the Bible, but I'll address that in a minute.
Yeah. And so it goes from 1820 to 2019. It shows the population. Asia has steadily increased. Africa has increased. North America has maintained the slimmest figure on this list, as well as Oceania, which is basically all of Australia. Our current global food crisis is a product and even thrives upon an incredibly wasteful process of production and consumption that is abetted by an avaricious global economic system which underprices food products, leading to the distortions in consumption and their constituents along with the entire value chain.
Can I say something here?
Yeah.
This is all Marxist nonsense.
It is.
The Green Revolution has produced more food ever than in all of human history.
Yeah.
And the Englishman who first wrote this, what was it? How long was the essay?
160 odd pages.
160 pages. He was born well before the Green Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
This is all nonsense. It's being peddled by people who hate humanity.
Yeah. People that really are peddling an idea that is humans are no different than the beast. And I'll get into that in a minute. I want to make a point that disproves this World Economic Forum report first. I say report, it's more of a propaganda mouthpiece. It says an incredibly wasteful process, blah, 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 that is abetted by an avaricious global economic system which underprices food products. Now, anybody that has gone to the supermarket here in the last week, feel free to correct me on this, but food prices have nearly doubled. I know eggs have tripled in some places. Gas, to get those things to the store, is nearly 150% of what it once was when Trump was in office. Now, this isn't to say that Trump did, everything that we can credit him for and everything that's good in this country is because of Trump. But we have to look at the facts here. Is we had food prices go down because our supply chain was willing to work better. Now, the first thing that is wrong with the World Economic Forum is they're saying the problem with our food system is derived inherently from a wasteful process that undervalues the food product. Now,
what does that mean?
They're saying we have more food waste. We can't produce enough food because it costs too little to buy at the store.
And it's supposed to be cheap. It's food.
Yeah. And
I'm not undervaluing the food there. And God bless our farmers. The more of it there is, which is good, the cheaper it's going to be. That's the situation we want. Cheaper food means more people.
And so for those of you listening out there, you can't really watch the show for those listening, think about this. I want to counter something already to the World Economic Forum report. I want to say that our food crisis is not because of underpriced food. It's
So
because of overpriced production.
I have a question. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
So Bill Gates is in on all this, right?
Oh yeah, he was the one that mentioned the wonderful, quotably Christian quote at the beginning. I say that with the most sarcasm I can.
So Bill Gates is buying up farmland all over the world right now.
Yeah.
Let that stew. I'll let you continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So when we discuss overpriced production, what I mean is, think about the gas that it costs to remine into petrol products that get our food to our table. The diesel fuel, the refining companies, the fracking companies, all of these places are now paying more because the federal government is regulating us out of our food. And, of course, the World Economic Forum is going to go up at the beginning of this before it says you're not paying enough. Overconsumption of food is a trend that is an economic construct of modern agro-industrial complex, not an accident or an unintended consequence. Now, I'm nobody who's going to tell you to go out and be a glutton for food, but I can tell you that Americans, the average people that I know, don't go to a buffet or even go to the store and buy food that they're not going to eat. They go and buy what is necessary because of the food being overpriced. So when we talk about being underpriced, I want to know what countries we're talking about.
Well, grain is at an all-time low in Russia and China.
Yeah.
Because Russia and China have taken the necessary steps to secure the food supply and make sure all citizens have access to it at a low amount. Whereas here in the West, in America, we seem focused on making sure only the rich can eat.
Oh, yeah. And so then it goes on to say agriculture is responsible for 70% of the world's fresh water use, taking rivers, lakes, and aquifers to breaking point in 20% of global greenhouse gas production. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I've never been to a farm where the production of greenhouse gas has outweighed the plants. When we're talking about farms, it seems that everybody has forgotten basic biology. And I guess, no credit to me. I guess I was just an idiot throughout high school who didn't do his work.
I didn't.
For those of you who have watched this show before, you know that I'm being sarcastic. Apparently, the elite have forgotten biology because not only are we able to use technology to hack the minds of the citizens, and make them think what the computer wants them to, as the last WEF report read. Apparently, they forgot that plants suck up carbon dioxide and expel oxygen for babies and mothers and innocent children to breathe. So what are we talking about here, Mick? What's your take on the WEF saying that now our farms are polluting the atmosphere with harmful chemicals?
First of all, the methane, which is the common argument, the methane from the cows is bad. Hang on. It's methane. It's biological. It's natural. Most of it goes back into the soil. It's fine.
There's a nitrogen cycle and a carbon cycle.
Secondly, they're not, 70% of the water is wasted. Water is recycled. Do I really need to go back to first grade for people here? If I need to, I will, but go look up the water cycle there. It's like a 3 or 4 step process.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as wasting water. It goes back in the air.
And even when, you mentioned a good point. When we talk about stuff like celery and cucumbers and aloe vera for sunburns, that's all absorbed back into the body when you eat water-rich foods.
Yeah, and this whole thing's a cycle. God intended for all this to be an infinite process, so we never run out. They're making up a problem to justify what some might call genocide. And I'm sorry to keep going here.
No, you're good.
Go on an Irish Catholic tirade. These people are going to cause a population collapse in Africa and India.
Yeah.
That's why India has sided with Russia over this Ukraine situation. The West has cut off the grain there. There's about almost 3 billion people in Africa now, and India has a large population, I believe 2 billion as well. That's where most of the world is now.
Asia and Africa, yeah.
They're on the verge of a population collapse. That's why all these civil wars have started in Africa these past few months. We've cut off the food there. These maniacs talking about depopulation and whatnot, they're causing it. They're going to murder God knows how many human beings just over the pond.
And I want to cut you off there. I want to interject something to your point, Mick. and you brought up a really good point, was creating a problem to offer the solution. Of course, the solution is going to be more
order out of chaos.
And so essentially what we're seeing here is the WEF is telling people your food is not high priced enough. This was in April 2020, April 29th of 2020, this report came out. So inherently, this is all by design. When you say your food is not high priced enough, so I'm not seeing how it's going to be any less wasteful if it's $1.30 more than it was, $5 more. If people are inherently a glutton, then they're going to eat regardless of what the price is. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I want to mention a document here. It was written by Pope Paul VI in 1968 in response to the rising academic world of population control and artificial contraception. Because this is right around the time of the sexual revolution, when these maniacs first started to get into power through the hippie revolution, the cultural revolution. It's called Humane Vitae. That's Latin for human life to the non-Catholics listening. This document said that Roman Catholics and Eastern Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Byzantine Catholics, etc., are not allowed to use contraception because it prohibits the creation of human life. Therefore, it's against God. It upholds the sanctity of human life as a moral law and refutes anything that opposes human life as it is ungodly. And this includes the idea of population control or forced sterilization, which is what this article is talking about.
Yeah. So you're inherently, and I want to bring up the theory that all of this is backed up by. If you are listening or you're watching and you have access to the internet, look up the Hegelian dialect, Hegelian, I believe is how it's spelled.
You got to break that down real quick?
Basically, the Hegelian dialect says, I am going to create a problem, and then I'm going to sell you the solution so I can get twice as rich. So essentially what the WEF is talking about here is we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that food prices are driven up to where it's even unaffordable for people to eat their normal amount. What they're trying to do is put you on a subsistence diet. They don't want you to be able to nourish and grow your body.
They don't want you strong and healthy. They want you weak and subservient.
They want you to be, for those people out there that know math and economics, stagnated. They want your growth to be stunted. So essentially what's happening here is they're telling you the world food crisis is purely because
they want us to be medieval peasants living on the land that they own, farming the crops
they want you to believe that you cannot afford to, future generations will not have the land or the resources to eat purely because your food is not high priced enough. So think about that. Ponder that World Economic Forum report. We're going to get into the graphs.
I have another thing to say. Sorry, I keep going on tangents here.
No, you're good. That's what it's about.
All these people are obsessed with power on Earth.
Yeah.
We have planets all around us. We're talking about terraforming. These people don't care about that. That's how you know they don't care about humanity. They're not trying to come up with a solution of, well, if we are running out, let's try to colonize a celestial body, start terraforming, God gave us the universe. Let's go use it. No. These people want power here on Earth, so they want us to be a bunch of medieval serfs or peasants who have no nutritional value. We're stunted in our growth and our mental thinking. All we'll do is we'll farm the crops and the land they own, and we'll fight their wars for them, and we'll never have free will again. That's what these people want. They want a neo-feudalism.
Yeah, and neo-feudalism and all of these things, you will own nothing and be happy. You will only eat what we tell you to eat. There is a Bible verse that mentions in the end times people will be told what they can and can't eat. Then it goes on to refute it. It says, for we know that, basically God's people can eat anything as long as it's blessed by God.
Yeah, here's the thing here. Tunnel News listening to this, there's been this other subversive push in the media about bug protein.
Yeah.
I said bug as an insect.
And for those who don't know, we'll have him on here at some point here in the near future. Sid Miller, our agricultural commissioner, had discussed this in detail at a forum that I was at not long back. He actually said that the majority of people in Holland and Amsterdam are already eating bug-based protein.
Yeah,
he said a delegate from the Amsterdam government came here and told him that. And so essentially, I'm going to show you this graph here. I don't know if anybody can see it. I hope you can.
You might have to describe it.
So
hang on, I'll hold it up. You describe.
Yeah, so I'm going to have you hold that up to the camera, Mick, because I want people to see this. Yeah, just up a little bit more. So what you're looking at here is the Malthusian graph. The green line represents deaths per population. The yellow line represents births. The blue line is your total population. I'm going to have you move it up just a little bit more. What you're looking at is 5 stages here. The first stage, basically the births and the deaths are nearly stagnant with each other. And you can probably take it down now if you want to. The first stage, your births and your deaths are pretty much stagnant. They're nearly equal to each other, with the birth rate being a little bit higher. It's what the Malthusians call the high stationary stage. The second you get into early expanding, essentially what you're looking at here is the birth rate by far outweighs the death rate. So your population is going to just boost here. Stage 3 is kind of where we see the late end of the population curve. It starts to digress a little bit. And stage 3 is what we would consider kind of the decline of population, where the United States and the majority of the Western nations are at today. Many of the folks that I talk to don't understand where we're at in our population. And to give you a run-up, we're not even replacing, for national births, 1 child for every 2 deaths. So this is where we could be right here in stage 3, the late expansion curve.
Can I come in here?
Yeah.
This was done intentionally. They made life so expensive because of inflation and artificial pricing that no one can afford to have a family anymore, or buy a home, or buy the proper amount of food for a family, so that they could push us in this direction. All of this has been intentional the past 40 years.
And we talk about low stationary, which is stage 4. For anybody wondering about this, just look up the Malthusian transition stages. Stage 4 is essentially where they desire it to be. Malthusians, Neo-Malthusians. When you get to the end of the low stationary, by then your deaths and births are equal, which is pretty much where we're at in this country. If we haven't passed stage 3, we are at stage 4. Stage 5 is a theoretical stage, I must add. They're not sure what happens at stage 5. More than likely a population collapse, because when they do the math, the trend continues of the decline in birth rate. Your total population begins from a kind of plateau. It goes up sharply, and then it just drops down. So what happens at stage 5, according to all of the hypotheses behind it, is your death rate is far 2 or 3 times higher than your birth rate. So your population declines. And when we look at the food problem, the World Economic Forum keeps saying we have a food problem. Well, if we look at a few other graphs here, and I'm just kind of going over these, I'll explain it here for you. They go from 1960 to 2013 to 2011. So the population goes from roughly 2.5 billion people, 3 billion people in 1960. And right at about here, we're sitting at about 8.5 billion people, if not 9 billion currently. The yield evolution of our crops have nearly doubled or tripled, if not.
So we have more food. We have more food than ever.
We are producing double of what the highest we ever did in the last 60 years.
So keep that number in mind.
So our food supply now, we go on to, let's see, calories, capacity, something like that. Anyway, 1960, what you're looking at is in South America, the calorie capacity of the food supply has nearly almost 1.5 times of what it was. When we look at Africa started out at about 2,000. We're looking at now about 2,700. When we look at North America, it has consistently gone up from maybe around 2,900. We're now looking at 3,000, about 3,700. So our food supply, calories per day per capita, has nearly doubled anyway. So keep in mind here that the yield evolution and the food supply in kilocalories per capita per day and the population have all been steady. So we now have enough food that we can supply maybe the entire hemisphere here.
We have an obesity crisis. That's how much food we have.
Yeah. So if you go to McDonald's, you order 3 burgers, it's the same price as something else. Don't tell me that food is underpriced. I'll tell you the problem here is all of the corporations and big pharma, if not are included in this, have and this is just my hypothesis, are in a giant scandal to undermine the nutrition of the American people. What we have seen consistently since 1950 and 1960, when McDonald's became a larger and ever-growing corporation, which now I would say probably has about several tens of thousands of stores in this one country alone, not to mention the airport ones across the world.
It's become an example of Americanism.
Yeah.
That's how many there are.
So what we're seeing here, though, Mick, and I'll let you butt in on this, of course. What we're seeing here is the food that is not good for you now costs less than the food that is good for you.
Yeah, that's intentional.
So when we talk about the food crisis, we're going to get right back to this after the commercial. We're going to tell you why the mass public is not aware of the undermining of their nourishment program. Stay with us. We'll be right back after a commercial break.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Welcome back, Johnson County, to Let Freedom Ring. I'm your host, Jake Wernette. Want to welcome you back on this wonderful Tuesday. I forget whether I said it was Thursday earlier or not. First of all, before we get back to the food crisis and how public health is being undermined, I want to say Joco Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. TuneInJoco.com is the place to find all the best ways to listen and watch, and the station app is also available for free on both Android and Apple devices. Simply search your store. Check out our lineup and more at JocoCommunityRadio.com. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your local Texas sales rep at 844-839-4245, 844-839-4245. Be sure to dress your arms and more at thetiffy.com. I would also like to give my bi-weekly shout out to HTO in Burleson, if they are listening and have reached out to me in regards to a sponsorship. I have not seen the email yet, so I'll be waiting for that. But I do recommend going any weekday or any weekend between 2 and 4 is happy hour. You can get a huge tea, as anybody can see here. It's compared to my hand, it's as big as a Sonic extra large cup. All that tea for only $1.99 instead of the usual $3.99. So go on by and get yourself. Try the blueberry green tea. We're looking at how American health and American crops are being undermined by I wouldn't say a grand conspiracy, but it almost seems close enough to it. We'll call it a Sherlock Holmes case for now. So we're looking at the USDA report, a look at agricultural productivity growth in the United States. The total factor productivity, the total output, have almost tripled until 2016 from 1948. So we're looking at nearly 70 years. Food production and total productivity has increased almost threefold, 300%. Even though labor has shrunk to nearly a quarter of what it once was, and land has nearly stagnated at about half of what it was. So I want to say that we discussed this here in a previous episode. It's because of the wetlands laws and because of all these endangered species laws that the government keeps emphasizing to local farmers. I don't know where to start with this. I'm going to start with the price. Why is it cheaper, many Americans may wonder, to go to McDonald's than it costs to go to the store and get a salad? Well, I'll tell you why. Salad to go, I went there. It's $8 after you get a salad and a drink. With that $8, I can go get 4 cheeseburgers at McDonald's. So why wouldn't I choose to go to McDonald's? I look like I'm getting more for my dollar. I'm going to tell you why. It's very simple. It's because of overregulation by the federal government. And we look at overregulation, we're talking about those wetlands laws, the many other laws. We're looking at eminent domain. We're looking at civil forfeiture laws. For those who don't know, it means law enforcement and the state or local government can seize your land in a criminal case. They can take your assets and your land, and all they have to do is have probable cause. Like the veteran. I don't know if many people saw that on YouTube. I believe it was an Iraq or a Gulf War veteran was driving his truck, had his entire life savings in a duffel bag because he didn't trust the bank to take care of his money. So he was taking it from his house to his new house when he was moving, and the I want to say it was ICE or it was Border Patrol had caught him and thought he was smuggling drug money. Anyway, they took all of his life savings, impounded his truck, and he never got a dime of it back. And so since then, he has been speaking out against civil forfeiture laws. But the base here is we have all of these communistic programs that our federal government can take a farmer's land. They can take all of it, and all they have to do is have probable cause. So the federal government wants to build a highway through there. They'll take that if they say you are holding an endangered species on your land. They don't even have to have a good name for it. They could just say it's the Harry Potter slug, something, I don't know. Just a stupid example for you. It's endangered. There's only 100,000 of them out of what we used to think was 1 million. Well, they could just come up with anything and say, well, it lives 10 meters below the soil. Somehow we found it, but you just never did when you were, perking your land for that shed that you wanted to build. Now we're going to have to take your farm too. So for those who don't know, there was a comic book that came out in 1948, I believe it was. It's called Is This Tomorrow? And I'll have to bring it in. I bought a copy of it. It came from the Catholical Guild or the Catholic Church of St. Paul, Minnesota, I believe it was where it was published. This comic book begins with a orchestrated food crisis. Essentially, what the book starts off with, and the way that they had provoked a communistic revolution in the United States past World War II, was they took over all of the farmland, subsidized it. Those who didn't give up their farmland were put to death at gunpoint. And essentially, they burned the surplus. Well, now we're seeing a loss of surplus based on the few economists and the lobbyists that I have talked to in my educational ventures had told me that the United States no longer has a surplus of eggs and wheat. Essentially, the federal government would store that, and when the prices got too high for consumers to do it, they would release a little bit, just like the National Petroleum Reserve, which Biden conveniently did before the midterms. Anyway, what we've seen is those farms are being routed out now. Our farms are being gotten rid of. The yeoman farmer no longer exists. The ideal middle class that Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers envisioned no longer exists because it's too expensive. So we're seeing people like Dole Fruit, Chiquita Banana, all these companies that were buying up plantation land like nobody's business in the 50s down in Central America. We mentioned that last Thursday. That's where the word banana republics came from, was the republics that were enslaved to banana producers. What we're seeing now is our own small-scale farmers becoming the new frontier for banana republicanism, basically enslaving the masses to an ever-increasing food shortage and food cost. I printed off something here. Conveniently enough, the working class and Neo-Malthusianism. Thomas Malthus came up with the theory. The Leninists and Marxists here at Marxist.org, the official archive for everything Communist Party propaganda. I'm just going to go through here and discuss a few things that catch my eye. I'm reading this for the first time with you guys. We're looking at, in the discussion, the majority agreed that abortions should not be punishable, and the question of so-called Neo-Malthusianism, the use of contraceptives, was naturally touched upon, as was also the social side of the matter. Mr. Vigdorchik, for instance, said, according to the report Ruskoye Slovo, the contraceptive measures should be welcomed amidst thunderous applause. To his quote, we have to convince mothers to bear children so that they can be maimed in educational establishments, so that lots can be drawn for them, so that they can be driven to suicide. Now, this came in a magazine called Pravda, number 137, the June 16th of 1913 issue, signed Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, published according to the Pravda text. The source was Lenin's Collected Works, Progress Publishers, 1977, Moscow, Volume 19, pages 235 to 237. So Marx is writing about this conference where they're promoting the use of contraceptives for population benefits. From the point of the view of the working class, however, it would hardly be possible to find a more apposite expression of the completely reactionary nature and the ugliness of social Neo-Malthusianism. Bear children so that they can be maimed. For that alone, why not that they should fight better, more unitedly, consciously, and resolutely than we are fighting against the present-day conditions of life that are maiming and ruining our generation? This is the radical difference that distinguishes the psychology of the peasant, handicraftsman, intellectual, and the petty bourgeoisie, or, in Lenin's terms, the rich man in general, from that of the proletarian, or the person who takes part in the revolution. The petty bourgeoisie sees and feels that he is heading for ruin, and life is becoming more difficult, that the struggle for existence is more ruthless, and that his position and that of his family are becoming more and more hopeless. It is an indisputable fact, and the petty bourgeoisie protests against it. But how does he protest? He goes on to mention class consciousness and all this other stuff. The only reason why we are unconditionally the enemies of Neo-Malthusianism, suited only to unfeeling and egoistic petty bourgeoisie couples who whisper in scared voices, God, grant we manage somehow by ourselves, so much the better if we have no children. So the communists here essentially are promoting the view that contraceptives, all of this is okay, but not because of the liberation of women or anything that we saw in the sex movement. What we're seeing here is, I've noticed a great parallel already between the World Economic Forum and the Working Class Neo-Malthusianism article. What we're seeing here is the Hegelian dialect at work, and it really is truly a marvelous thing to witness it in action when you know what's happening, because you feel so much more liberated from the mainstream view of things. We're seeing our food prices double. We're seeing our eggs triple. We're seeing our gas double. We are seeing all of this because this is all leading up to something. The end goal is that you will be able to eat the same amount for what they're saying is more. So the World Economic Forum says once we jack up the prices on food, the food crisis will solve itself. So essentially, we are malnourishing our children. We are sending our kids to public schools to be malnourished because they don't get the nourishment they need from the food. So we might not even get to the other articles today, but I really quickly want to go on a rant here. There are 3 things that I came up with not long ago about how we can solve this whole thing. People are saying there's no way we can solve it. There's no way we can solve it. There is a very simple way to do it, and here's how. Number 1, we need to balance our budget. When we have a balanced budget, inherently we have greater freedom to determine the factors that we want that budget to be spent on. And if we are to spend more, it needs to go towards programs that better the Department of Agriculture, not the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and any of these other unconstitutional agencies created by Jimmy Marks Carter in the 1970s. The Department of Agriculture is a brilliant institution. It's just managed by idiots. What we need to see is a greater budget going towards a green revolution again. And I don't mean the Green New Deal and all this Bolshevik nonsense. What I mean is we need programs in our Department of Agriculture that not only create more opportunities for farmers. We need to have the Department of Agriculture not necessarily subsidize, but give out grants to schools with the Future Farmers of America program. When we are teaching our kids the value of crops, when we're teaching them the value of society being based on the yeoman farmer as our founders had intended on it to be, nothing has changed when we look at our society. It is truly the farmers of this country that are the backbone of our national defense. Without them, our soldiers overseas and abroad cannot eat. Without them, our citizens cannot eat. Without them, our schools cannot feed our children. Without them, our supermarkets would be empty. So I guess this episode today is dedicated to the rugged, masculine American farmer. When we look at this time is different. No, it's not. When we look at the Neo-Malthusian view, anything is necessary to create a solution. And Thomas Malthus had just as much in common with, I believe it was Friedrich Hegel was his first name, than anybody else, because Hegel said you can sell them the solution. He didn't necessarily say you can sell it, but you can offer a solution. And the party that offers the solution gets to stay in power. So you are seeing, just like the gas crisis in the 70s, we have the capacity to overturn all of this. Just like Jimmy Carter, the failure of his administration to open up the production power of the American manufacturing sectors and the private gas companies in this country, instead of divvying out grants and money to OPEC corporations who do not have our nation's interests in mind. Would it have been better for Jimmy Carter to invest in private production? Just like nowadays, we see the onslaught of war abroad. Well, a third of the world's wheat and all of this comes from Ukraine, they said. Well, I recall a time in my history books when Kansas and Nebraska were called the breadbasket of America. I wasn't alive then, but many of the elders that I have spoke to recall when the farmers before the Dust Bowl and even after worked hand over fist to keep crops growing in this country. And we saw the socialism come in with FDR, and whether he knew it or not, there was something evil at foot, I want to say. The search to undermine the American farmer, the search to pay them off to not grow any more food. We need to stop subsidizing our family farms and our small farm businesses. We need to start regulating monopolies. We need to start trust busting again with these large corporations that have a majority of the market share. Nowhere else in the world and no other time in history has Republican governments and capitalism bred such greed and such avarice as we have seen in the corporatism and the pseudo-fascist corporations that are monopolizing on family farms. The backbone of this country is being crippled, as you can see, with a crowbar to the back. So what we need to do is regulate and trust bust these corporations. What we need to do is invest in the average American farmer. Again, when we look at the land that is available in this country for private companies and private farmers, the average American to get back to work, putting money into the schools for FFA programs so that these kids can be given a land grant when they leave high school. And the federal government says, We will not subsidize you. You can grow whatever you want that the market dictates the public needs. Need more bread, grow more wheat. Need more beer, grow more barley. I don't know. The market has been turned upside down, what we have seen, to a socialist utopia, they call it, at the expense of mothers and children not being able to eat, and our boys overseas being starved and attrited in a war that we are not supposed to be in. So, how do we solve this? I gave two firm steps that I believe, and you heard it here first in case any politician thinks about using this for their own private advantage. I propose investing in FFA programs. I propose investing in schools to teach future farmers of our generations that come after us to invest in their own farms again. Land grants are a possible thing. The 40 acres and a mule that we saw with the Homestead Act that allowed people to move west into Kansas and Nebraska, which created the breadbasket image of America and, frankly, the breadbasket of this entire hemisphere. We need to bring back programs for the federal government to give land grants, not necessarily taking the land and selling it, but helping people own their own farms again, helping people invest in their property again, whether that is by tax breaks or getting rid of property tax for all confirmed private farms again. I would not oppose getting rid of property tax for small business farmers at the expense of having better and more nourishment for our public. When we look at other programs that we can do, trust busting is a big thing, taking away the market share of the big guy and giving it to the little guy. Again, that's not communism, mind you. That is evening out the market for the people that were stabbed in the back initially by these corporations that frankly don't care about their employees. They don't care about the nourishment of this country. They only care about driving the price up through getting rid of these surpluses. That leads me to my next thing. We need to unsubsidize family farms and businesses again. The problem of the FDR administration, I had spoken to a gentleman who's been a Democrat his entire life, told me his dad worked for the Agricultural Adjustment Agency, or the AAA under FDR's administration. When he had told me, his dad came home very distraught most of the time, and he had always asked his daddy, he said, "Daddy, why are you coming home depressed?" He goes, "Well, the AAA sent me out to a family farm to slaughter some cows because the agency, the bureaucracy, wanted the price driven up. They wanted the price driven up, and I'm going to show the article again here. Seems a little bit like something else we read from the WEF. They wanted the price driven up so that the depression would end." But all that we saw was people were malnourished after the Great Depression. It wasn't until the baby boomers were born in the late 40s that we finally saw posterity prosper in this country again under the Eisenhower administration. Some of the greatest wealth advances and racial equality that we put into our businesses in this nation. No period since then has seen the same booming growth in the American economy. The day that our federal government unsubsidizes our family farms, the day that we finally put the American civilian farmer before the corporation again, is the day that we will see surpluses like nobody's business. When we rededicate our land to these yeoman farmers instead of corporations who stab the competition and the American citizens that they are supposed to provide for in the back, the day that we see those small farmers come back and say, instead of burning your surplus, instead of slaughtering it and leaving it on the ground for the ants, why don't we take these good foods that are being grown extra and give it to the schools? Now, I mention the school lunch proposal here. Instead of burning the surpluses, I'm going to give you a real quick example. Johnny grows 2 fields of corn instead of the 1.5 that the federal government paid him to. So that other half of the field gets burned up, or it gets put in a stockpile and gets dead before it can be given out. So if the federal government stopped paying Johnny to grow 1.5 instead of 2, Johnny could sell those that other half field of corn to school lunch programs that disperse the school lunches, or he could give them right to the schools for a smaller amount. Now, Johnny might be getting less, but the kids in his community are getting an ear of corn instead of a frozen meat patty or whatever else they're giving. Johnny is giving them 2 more cows that he sends to the processing plant instead of letting them eat bugs. So, where are we heading in this country? I want the viewers to think about this until we come back on Thursday. And I hope that we can bring some of these things to light. Yes, the government pays your family farms to get rid of surpluses instead of donating them to homeless shelters, men's shelters, women's shelters, and giving them to the schools to feed the children. They're paying them to get rid of it, to burn it, to not plant it. So that is where the food crisis is coming in, not because of the underpriced food, like the WEF says, like they are the smartest economists in the world, yet they can't figure out what is causing food prices to go up and why we are short on food. It's because we have not become independent from other countries producing food abroad. There are 5 solutions I mentioned: investing in Future Farmers of America programs and land grants for those students when they leave those programs and go to college or go to trade schools for becoming farmers or tractor mechanics or other things. Number 2, unsubsidizing family farms and small businesses. Number 3, trust busting. Number 4 is we bring back programs that help our farmers stop getting rid of food, and we create programs instead that give out surpluses to school lunches, to children in the community, to homeless shelters, to men's shelters. That is the beginning of when people stop being malnourished in this country and start becoming proactive citizens again. And number 5 is we finally create infrastructure that enables us to keep farming. When the government stops creating laws that allow them to steal a farmer's land, when the government stops passing laws that drives up the prices of land, when the government stops creating policies that pay people to burn this or kill that, and the government finally creates laws that allow our farmers to get back to work, to do what they need to do, and stop driving up gas prices so our diesel truckers cannot bring the food from the one end of I-30 to the other, or from the farm to the middleman to the Burleson supermarkets. We have a lot of farmers around here. We are a farming community, and our farmers are suffering like the likes of which we have never seen before. So if you have close connections with your House official, your Senate official, encourage those 5 premises. It will get our country back on track. Instead of giving money to the DoD, give it to the Department of Agriculture so we can invest in the future, so that we can invest in the farmland that we have now, and that we can invest in the legacy that the yeoman farmer has left from the days of our founders to the far distant reaches of the future, where if Christ has not come back by that point, our younger generations are able to eat. Our elders are not subsequent to being socially invaluable because they are skin and bones, and that we are not taking care of our homeless veterans that are on the street that have not had a meal in months. I want to thank those of our citizens who continue to be proactive in giving out food to the homeless, for serving their community first. They do a lot more on the daily basis than our politicians in Washington could ever dream of. So it's time that we started investing in the American farmer. It's time that we stop believing, frankly, I know there might be kids listening, this rubbish about the World Economic Forum. It's time we brought our dependency back to our own citizens and stopped giving in to federal programs that don't work, and frankly, a globalist agenda that is driven at being dependent on foreign aggressors, being dependent on people who don't have our nation's interest in mind, and frankly, people who talk down to the little man. It's time that we got politicians that support our yeoman farmers, people that support feeding the homeless, people that support putting surpluses into schools instead of into burn piles. And it's time that we brought our dependency and our pride back into our American farmers. So it's time that we stop listening to these people who want to peddle the Hegelian dialect, serving us a problem and then giving us a silver platter, a $30 billion grant, a $30 billion bond, another $3 trillion in deficit that our country cannot afford, just like the food that we are supposed to be serving. So join us Thursday. Thursday will be another surprise topic day. Ponder the communists in the global community. Ponder the communists that we have running these eminent domain and wetlands projects. So God bless you. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the American farmers. Thank you.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godly, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
If you are trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking